Davis family, I think, is rich because of. Remember, he didn't come from money. Like, wasn't I don't remember what the fuck Al Davis did, but he wasn't.
He ended up owning a team. Yeah,
like he's the one family. Because remember, they always talk about them being broke, where they can barely make payroll.
He wasn't in business before. He was a coach.
Yeah, wasn't he in football? Like he was.
Yeah.
Their money is football, and that's why they've had. And now they're probably fine now because they're in fucking Vegas.
Oh no, Mark Davis. The fact that he could walk around with that goofy haircut. It's like, hey, Buster Brown, man, what the fuck?
Exactly.
Do you think he's like Bob Keeshan, Captain Kangaroo? Those are the only two people ever that wore that haircut. And we're proud of it, right? I mean, Mark Davis, he is living the dream, this guy. He's got babes. He owns the Las Vegas Raiders. But he seems like, honestly, I saw a feature on him on 60 Minutes. And, maybe everybody looks and goes, holy shit, how did that fat fuck get so rich? I mean, everything seemed like somebody that would be interesting to talk to because on the surface of observing this guy, he seems like somebody that understands how fucking lucky he was to be in that position.
Wake up with Defo, joined by Lubie. Welcome to the Defo Show.
All right, very pleasant. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Defo Show. We got Jeff DeForest, that would be me, and of course the handsome gentleman over there, the young guy. That's when Mike Lubie Lubitz, the ever popular Mike Lubie Lubitz. You are quite popular, Lubie. Don't go many places where people don't say, "Hey, are you still doing the radio?" No, what are you doing today?
That's been years.
I'm doing something else. How can I find it? Here's how you find it. Okay, yeah, I'm not real good at that. Is Lubie still with you? That's always the next question after several locator inquiries about what the hell we're doing. And still very popular, Mike Lubie Lubitz. So good to be with you. And we'll be with you along with Chris Perkins later on today. He's going to join us. Chris Perkins, one of our favorites. I don't know that. I mean, can you really zero in on Dolphin minutia at this point, at this stage? Nothing's really happening there.
Nothing. That's the thing.
Maybe is a scathing indictment. It's kind of like the Jack Smith investigations. I'm getting a little feedback here. I don't know if that's something that I can correct, but no, it's okay now, Lubie. So
it's it's
hopefully it's all good. Football, the wild card weekend came to a conclusion last night in a year where it was just a sea of gagging chalk. Players were prevailing all season long. It was remarkable. My friend Mike Jones, who is part of my Bury Your Bookie show, usually joins us every Thursday on that program on nofilter.net and various other platforms. And he's been sending me numbers, none of which I can actually remember, but they're overwhelmingly weighted towards favorites being victorious this year in the National Football League. Both, enormously straight up, which is not uncommon, but even more so when you look at previous seasons. You would figure that there would be somewhat of a balance between the number of underdogs that have covered the point spread. I mean, theoretically, it should be 50-50, should it not, Lubie? It doesn't work out that way, but in general theory, when you have line makers putting out a number that makes it appealing to bet on the underdog, you would think that they might prevail in about half of the situations, but that's not even been close. It's an enormous weighted number going the other way for the chalk. So that in general is not good for bookmakers. I don't know that any of them are crying because guess what? There's always next year and there's the rest of the playoffs. But playoffs have been a little bit of a different story. Not only did you have three underdogs cover the point spread, but you had three underdogs that covered the point spread win outright, including last night. Just an ugly performance by the Minnesota Vikings, who were part of that whole crying segment of the sports population, sports fan base, Lubie. I'm not a big fan of this because I think it's very cyclical, and I think you have to give these things some time. It applies to both the NFL playoffs and especially the new 12-team college football playoff, where people are crying, well, I mean, how can you seed teams like that? You really need to do something different. Division winners shouldn't be accorded this. Conference winners shouldn't be accorded the bye. And while there probably was some truth to that this season, I don't know that it's applicable to every season. Do you? I would think the majority of the time, division winners would end up being superior to the wild card teams that they would have to face at home. Although that was far from the case this year. You had a lot of teams, including the Rams last night. I mean, here you had a 14-3 Minnesota Viking team going against a Ram team that I want to say was what 10-7 this year.
7, yeah.
10-7. Okay, so you have a team that literally was 4 games better in
Yes.
in the NFL in the regular season than the team that they were forced to play on the road. Now it turned out to be an
Forever.
unfortunate situation where the game had to be moved out of the Los Angeles area. It did seem like though, Lubie, and when I was in LA, that the Rams were a major entity. That they weren't the number one priority. The Dodgers were the number one team, and then later the Lakers kind of took over. The Rams were far, though, Luby, from a distant consideration, considering the real logjam of teams that you have competing in Los Angeles, including at that time you had UCLA and USC football were major players,
Yep.
and you certainly had UCLA basketball was a major player.
Yep.
So there was a lot of competition for the sports interest, for sports fans, and their investment in teams. But the Rams were still a major player. I'm not sure that was always the case in years since, but they did play a very favorable number of fans in the stands yesterday. Now, if you had tickets, Phoenix is a decent schlep from Los Angeles, Luby, if you're driving that.
Yeah.
It's not like it's around a corner. Could it be 8 hours away? No. Yeah, it could be, right? Phoenix, Arizona from Los Angeles. Is it 8 hours of driving? I have to look that up.
I'll look it up now. I don't think they're close. I mean, you're not.
Maybe less. You know what? Because I want to say that Phoenix and Las Vegas might be. Phoenix might just be a little bit further of a schlep than Las Vegas would be for Los Angeles and
It's
Vegas.
about 5 hours. It's like 6 hours. It's like going to Tallahassee. It's like
okay. What do you think, Luby? I mean, if you had tickets for a playoff game and you were a big fan of the Los Angeles Rams and you had to drive 6 hours to Phoenix, Arizona to go see a game on a Monday night, would you be inclined to do that, or would you be inclined to do what I would do, which is immediately sell the tickets for whatever I could get?
Exactly. I like my team, but I'm not driving 6 hours for specifically a game. Like, that's weird.
You probably would have done it, though, for your Seminoles back in the day, no?
I would go up and spend the weekend there and then see it. But, like, it was a Monday, like on a weekday to go
Monday night, that makes
to Arizona. Like, I don't have any connection to Phoenix, Arizona. You know, like, you're going there just for the game. Like, that I've never done. I know people do that. Like, they travel and follow their team on trips. I've never understood that. Like, I'm a big fan.
I mean, if you were a Minnesota Vikings fan, well, you only had a week's notice to decide whether or not you wanted to go to Los Angeles. But I would think Los Angeles, not with the fires and the conditions there right now, but in general, under normal circumstances, you would be much happier going to Los Angeles than Phoenix, Arizona, which you've been to, Luby.
I have.
And yeah, I mean, it's all right. You go there if you have like really bad lungs. If you smoked a lot of pot and cigarettes in your lifetime, you're thinking you could breathe that air there.
Yes,
but I've been there a few times under different circumstances. Never for a long period of time. Covered a couple of Super Bowls there. You were with me on one of those trips. Did a boxing match there. That was a wild. I still remember this show. I was doing boxing with former featherweight champion Barry McGuigan. Barry McGuigan is a huge hit. I mean, a major star in Ireland as a boxer. He was a world champion, very exciting fighter. And I remember being, I was thinking, wow, what a pleasure this is to sit here, call fights with Barry McGuigan. I'd never worked with him before and never worked with him since. But what was funny about, I still remember this night because you had a 2-hour block for the boxing on TV. And they had maybe 4 or 5 prelims before the main event. Now, I used to root for this. I always rooted for the 1-round knockouts in the prelims because who wanted to go through the dreadful preliminaries unless they had a really good matchup? And usually it was very lopsided. The promoters' fighters were winning, much like in the world's worst boxer tape, where the promoters' fighters, this guy, Tony Moscow, he's got one fight under his belt, and they put him in there with a total stiff. I actually thought, and this is probably politically incorrect, but how can I put this gently? the word retard is not something
Oh,
that you should be
no,
employing.
no.
But I did think that there were some mental diminished capacities with the guy Jimmy Smith when we went into the locker room to talk to the guy very briefly, just because we knew nothing about him. He was making his pro debut, and I remember saying to my buddy who was calling the fights with me that night, a guy named Charles J, that this guy seems a little off, doesn't he?
Oh, Jesus. That was
Wasn't
before.
common.
Oh, God.
Now, in that case, it was a spectacular 17-second knockout, and it became the fodder of great humor, as it's still circulating on the internet today, coming up not necessarily as the fight that we called, but people are taking various adaptations of it and putting their own spin on the thing. But it was just total ugliness. Anyway, this night with McGuigan, all of the prelims are one-round knockouts, like quick one-round knockouts. And then the main event turned out to be like a 1 or 2 round fight. So I remember having to pull up a chair, and Barry McGuigan and I had to shoot the shit for an hour to fill the rest of the television time. They
That's
didn't
a
have anything to go to. Yeah, well, that timing didn't work out. You always want the about to be announced a decision maybe at the end of the show, and you sign, "Hey, we'll see you next month on the Schlitz
Yeah.
Malt Liquor Fight Night." So McGuigan and I mean, I remember that distinctly, and I didn't get to spend any time in Phoenix because I was off doing another event like the next day. That was the life, Lubie. That was a good time.
You're everywhere, yeah.
I used to really enjoy it. I was talking with Joe Casal, our good friend Joe Casal. We went to with the Funky Biscuit on Sunday night,
Nice.
and he was talking about all this world travel that he was doing, and he's still traveling. He's still doing NFL games. He's mostly a spotter for network broadcasts, either TV or radio. And he was working with Tom Brady a week ago.
Oh, nice. There
Said
you
that
go.
Brady is a super nice guy. Brady was a super nice guy. Brady said to him that he might be at the production meeting. He says to Joe, he says, almost as a matter of introduction, he says, "You might be the world's oldest living spotter." 'Cause he's like, Joe's got to be in his late 60s at this point. And Joe fires back to Brady. He says, "Well, the key word there is living."
Yeah.
To which Brady, I mean, cracked up, and they became fast buddies after that. Although he would say the same thing about Brady's announcing that most people are saying, which is, and he's right there in the booth with him, that the Raiders ownership conflict is really a source of concern.
Yeah, that's weird. I do think that if he's going to actually be involved in the hiring process, then how is he calling games? Like, I don't understand that at all.
Well, and the point being, and I guess he's not. He doesn't have access to what most announcers would, which it can be a valuable thing to be able to sit down and actually talk to the coaches and figure out what the hell they're doing.
When we had him on last week, talked about how when they sit down with people, they get an access that most reporters don't.
Yes,
and reporters literally that's their job, and they find a way to make a living doing it. So if you're getting better access, you would think it's valuable. I mean, you're doing these broadcasts now are like 4 hours. Like there's a lot of time to fill in, and they'll throw in little tidbits that you would think you could get from these meetings. But especially if you're the color guy, like the color is the one that's supposed. Yeah, I talked to this guy. He's feeling this. Last week it was a tough. Like Brady doesn't get any of that. Like you're missing a lot. You would think.
Yes, and I don't know that this was ever going to be a part of his style, but I really thought that he was going to be somewhat of a cross between what Tony Romo did in his first year and maybe a little John McEnroe in his early stages as an announcer, where you went, wow, I mean, I really feel like I'm inside the mind of the coaches and the players. This is what they probably are thinking right now. But I don't know that you got any of that from Brady. It's a lot of sort of generic stuff.
Yes.
That almost anybody could be saying. The fact that it's Tom Brady saying it, I don't think makes it any more important and nor illustrative or stand out. But he sure looks good. I mean, you would have to say that. but has he said anything of any great significance during his first year as a broadcaster? No, nothing. But most of these guys, unfortunately, now and very popular and highly regarded is Greg Olson, who. And while I'm a fan of Greg Olson as a person, he's a genuinely good guy. I knew him a little bit when he was a UM player and saw him afterwards when he was a pro. He was represented by Drew Rosenhaus, who brought him around to a couple of things I attended. And I couldn't have any more of a favorable impression about Greg Olson. So personally, I think the guy's a mensch. As an announcer, while tremendous potential, it seems, just yapping too much. No, Lubie, what do you think? Are you on board with that? Or are you one of the people that thinks that he stands out over the others?
I'm in the middle. Like people keep talking about, oh, Brady needs to watch out. He took Olsen's spot. I'm like, Brady, because they do the late game or the big game of the week, I've actually been watching more Brady than I had early in the season. The last few weeks, I've been able to catch some of these games, and he did a playoff game this week. Like I don't think Brady sucks or anything, but you're not wrong.
No,
He doesn't
nothing remarkable, though, right?
doesn't add any. Like again, you want the guys that tell the stories of like I remember the time, da 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 da.
Yes.
Or and then do the thing where right now in this situation, personally, this is what I would look for. This is what I would try to do. Like the stuff Romo, you said it. I don't need the picking plays. I don't care about that, but just situational. Put yourself in there because you're fucking Tom Brady. You literally won 7 Super Bowls. You went to like 11 or 10. Like you played for 20 years for 2 different franchises. Like you can impart some, and you played with one of the most famous franchise dynamics ever. So you can add a lot in that regard. And he never does that. And Olsen, I like him more than you do because he gets on your nerves.
I don't dislike him. I don't think every play is a sensational play that needs to be embellished with 2 minutes of color analysis in between play calls.
He overtalks.
Yeah.
He does overtalk. That is something I can't deny. But that's why we like. Maybe I don't know if I don't know where Charles.
Would you compare Olsen to Herb Street? Are they sort of similar?
See, what's funny is it sucks because I used to like Herb Street. I don't know what to do with Herb Street now because he's become such a buffoon with his analysis.
Too. Yeah.
When he does, whenever he talks on shows and stuff, the stuff he says is so fucking stupid that it bleeds over into my opinion of him calling games. Because when he calls games, he's fine. It's just like whenever he does an interview now, he's so weird with his SEC bias. And then now that the SEC failed in a lot of ways in the postseason, he's had to do hamana and backtrack and bullshit. And he's just said a lot of really dumb shit when he does interviews. But when he calls games, he's fine. It just
he's all right.
It's hard to like have an opinion about someone here and then not have it bleed into this. Look, Olsen, I think he has an idea of what he's doing, and he tried to do a little bit of other stuff we like.
Maybe just trim down a little bit in terms of the verbiage. He'd probably stand out. He might really be good. But
look, what's interesting
I guess that we'll have to just take that, right, and say he's good.
He's fine. It's just look, and I don't know where he learned this because we were talking with him before he got with Ian, and he was doing college, and he bounced around with different people, and then maybe being paired with Gus Johnson. But Charles, that's why we always like Charles Davis. Charles Davis is very like he gets in, he says something concise, and then he gets the fuck out. Like there'll be periods of time where you forget Charles Davis is on the call with Ian.
Yes,
because he's not just, and I don't know if working with Ian, he's taking a step back again. When you're with Gus Johnson, he takes over the broadcast. So maybe that actually helped Charles Davis in that regard because Charles Davis, I don't know the pinnacle, I don't know what word you would use because there's other guys that are held in high esteem, but he does it the way that I'd like the guy to do it. Once in a while, he throws in a little statement. He throws in something that it's like, interesting. And then he gets the fuck out. Like he doesn't feel like he has to talk all the time. I don't know how you teach Greg Olsen that.
It's funny, and this was always enjoyable for me, and it's a throwback kind of thing as a sports fan. But I mean, we know that 940 wins, which was carrying the game last night. It gets really lousy reception at night almost anywhere.
They're doing NFL games? Oh, interesting.
Okay. They had the NFL game. It's been bouncing back and forth, depending, I guess, on which network is carrying the game on the radio.
Fox, but CBS, yeah.
I originally turned on QAM to see if they had the game, and they had a bunch of guys yapping. So I thought, well, geez, is 940 carrying this game? And they are, I believe, a Westwood One.
Yes,
one of the network.
They always work. Yes.
So sure enough, it's there with hollering Kevin Harlan, who you talk about adding a lot of verbiage. He certainly does all of that. Although you're looking for more imagery, and you need a guy to sort of set up things. I mean, when you're watching on TV, obviously you can see that a guy's in motion or whatever. And I don't know that it's always necessary to point that out, but he was giving all kinds of descriptions, setting up a mile a minute. And that was a couple of nights ago. I was listening to Harlan, and I thought, my God, I don't know that I can take this. Last night, though, on Westwood One, and I don't know who the play-by-play guy was. He kind of had sort of an unusual voice, and he was working with Mike Mayock. Mayock, yeah, former GM and a guy that was on ESPN for many, many years. I have to say, Lubie, in between the static interruptions, I really enjoyed these two guys. I really did. I thought, wow, this is a kind of football radio broadcast that I found Mayock was very informative and had good timing with the information he was infusing into the broadcast. Didn't overdo it. Wasn't a screaming maniac. And the play-by-play guy was very, very cool. Very sort of low-key, but had a sense of humor about things. He threw in his own analysis here and there without being overbearing. And very good broadcast. Whoever was on, maybe Jim Sarney could figure it out for us. Whoever was on the
I'm
broadcast,
looking
Mike
it up.
Mayock last night,
Can't see
did a very nice job, and they were a good team together for a radio broadcast, especially. That they would have been very pleasant to hear as the announcers on a TV telecast, because it does seem like these color analysts are coming and just really trying to force it. I'll say this about Olsen: he doesn't repeat himself over and over again like we do on this show, Lubie. I mean, he comes with fresh bullshit after every play. All right. So the game last night, Sam Darnold. That was one of the stories. We talked about this. The way that he was airmailing receivers in that game against Detroit.
Yeah, it's coming to a close.
You were like, "Whoa, is this glass slipper time for the Sam Darnold story?" Which I thought was a really good story. He's an extremely likable guy from everything that I've been able to deduce from interviews. And yet, the theory now today, headlines all over. Darnold cost himself millions.
Yeah, I think he's shown that he's not a bust, and there's a home for him in the NFL. But I don't see the Vikings parting with JJ McCarthy anytime soon. He sort of showed his hand by the end of the year. It's sort of when defenses had a chance.
It was really just the last couple of games.
Yes, the last 2
game
3
he got destroyed, and he got sacked 9 times last night.
He was holding on to the ball a lot last night. He wasn't getting it out. Justin Jefferson was almost an afterthought at times.
A lot of overthrows of Jefferson too.
He was off, and yeah, he was getting hit. But again, it's the playoffs. You're going to get hit, man. Like you got to get the ball out. And
get rid of it, my friend.
He just wasn't, and I don't know. He wasn't turning it over, so that's good. But he had a good enough season where someone will give him a chance. If not the Vikings, he definitely isn't this. Well, this guy's now a cornerstone for I don't think we're there with Sam Darnold.
All right, so maybe we should save our playoff takes and takeaways, which I stole from an article that I was reading online on CBS Sports. Okay. I can't say I disagree with what they were speculating about, which is it was one of those winners and losers things that you see. So Darnold was listed, and I think he was number 1 on the losers in the postseason. Mike Tomlin was on that list also. And all of a sudden, you're looking at Mike Tomlin's record, and there's some warts there, Lubie. There's a little zit right here above.
I would like to know how involved in personnel he is, because the problem is people don't look at the roster. They look at, well, he's a great coach, and they make it every year, but they fall short. Well, have you looked at the roster? Like, their offensive talent is not good.
Yeah.
And their defense every year, even though they get rid of guys and bring in new guys, somehow is strong. They haven't had a quarterback since Roethlisberger. And Roethlisberger, I think, is already in the Hall. Roethlisberger's been out of the league a while now, and every quarterback they've thrown his way is sort of
They're trying to learn shit. It's like being the Dolphins, isn't it?
Yes. But how much? At least McDaniel supposedly is highly involved in personnel, so that's why I blame McDaniel more. I don't know if Tomlin is. Like, usually organizations like that have a hierarchy. People seem to be coming down on Tomlin, and I'm like, I get it because they're not winning these games, but they're there with teams that are like, why are they? They shouldn't even be there. Like Russell Wilson, Justin Fields from the graveyard. Kenny Pickett was a guy you used a first round pick on. Like,
yep.
I mean, their quarterback position's been a freaking disaster. Now, if he's wanted those guys, that's a different story. But it sort of feels like he's just playing with the cards he's been dealt. Like, I give him a lot more credit than blame.
If you were Kenny Pickett, would you be at this stage busting at the seams? You know how competitive these guys are. You have to be to reach this level of sporting competition. That's kind of repetitive there. But do you think he's happier now being away from the pressure of being the Pittsburgh savior after playing at Pitt? Yeah. The savior for the Steelers, now just drafting in as the backup to Josh Allen with the Buffalo Bills. And having the luxury of possibly going to a Super Bowl. That's going to be just a great matchup. I don't know how the game's going to transpire or be contested, but I mean, on paper, as they say, and maybe a burning sheet of loose leaf paper, but Baltimore-Buffalo, does that not seem like when is that game going to be played? Because that's a marquee matchup. I'm not sure that Houston goes toe to toe with Kansas City. Although I'd love to see Kansas City get knocked off because the Kansas City Chief backers this year are really full of themselves, Lubie. One of which is our good friend, the Greek. Greek, every time I go on his show, he keeps telling me nobody's beating Kansas City.
Well, he did the thing with the Patriots. Like, he does that. He gets behind the winner and he just rides the wave. And there's nothing wrong with that because.
Wouldn't you like to see him get upset at home?
I don't know what to do with the Chiefs because the teams around them. I'm not a fan of the Ravens. I'm not a fan of the Bills. So I usually don't root for the dynastic team, but I don't like the other two either. So I don't know what to do with that. The Bills Ravens is Sunday. It's the last game of the weekend. It's the prime time, Sunday 6:30. It is the game of the weekend.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's a hell of a matchup. So other matchups are set. Chris Perkins is going to join us here in a few minutes. Chris is on board, right? Ready to go? Okay, great. I always love talking to Chris Perkins, so we'll have him next up on the show here, the Defo Show, and we'll be back with Chris and his impressions of what's going on in the National Football League. And also, I don't know, what would you bet, yes or no? I'm going to say no, that Deion Sanders is coaching in the NFL next year. I don't think that's going to happen. Do you?
I hope so. I'd love to see it because I think it's going to be a flaming fucking
disaster.
You
want him to be exposed, yeah.
I think it's going to be a fucking disaster, and I'd love to hear the crickets shut the fuck up about the guy that doesn't coach at all, but is good at fucking BS and somehow turned around these programs, and I don't know.
He is the sporting version of Donald Trump, isn't he, in a way?
He talks a lot of shit, and
you never see a bunch of shit, and people will start buying it.
You never see him doing anything. And you hear from people that leave, they're like, yeah, he doesn't do anything. Like, all the people that leave, that they're like, oh, they're lying. Their consistent opinion is Deion is barely involved. Because he is. He hasn't gone on one recruiting trip. Bill Belichick's already going in homes. Deion's been a coach between Jackson State and Colorado like 4 or 5 years. He doesn't go to any homes. Like, what the fuck? Like, as a college coach, like, I'd love to see him in the NFL when it's even more responsibility and even more of that overseer shit that he's already doing. I'd love to see just how effective it is. We'll see. I don't know. The McCarthy thing was funny how that happened. Like, he should have been fired just to be fired, but they couldn't work out years. I'm like, that guy fucking sucks. Like, I don't understand that at all.
Well, he has interest from other teams. Multiple teams are interested in Mike McCarthy. All right, we'll get the real scoop on this because Lubie and I are just speculating and spewing out bullshit here, and you guys are probably tired of it. So let's get an authority on the show. Coming up in just a moment will be Chris Perkins. We'll be back with that in a moment. Now that.
The time.
8:32.
Hey folks, Tony Segreto here. Let me ask you a question. What do you look for when you go out to eat? Good food, obviously, friendly atmosphere, not too loud, but good energy, reasonable prices, and a place where you feel comfortable. All those ingredients, no pun meant there, are hard to find unless you're talking about the Texas Roadhouse. You see, they encompass all of those attributes. Really, really good food, amazing atmosphere, good for a family, good for a date, or just a night out for yourself, and prices that will make you extremely happy. Their ribs unmatched. Steaks hand-cut every day. Everything, and I mean everything, is made on site, including their incredible bread. It's the one day, folks, that you can forget about low-carb diets. Trust me when I tell you, Texas Roadhouse, your restaurant, your destination when you say, where should we go and eat tonight?
From the newly renovated sports bar to the beautiful bayside views captured at the Tiki Bar, Jimmy Johnson's Big Chill has it all. Located at mile marker 104, the Big Chill also offers waterfront dining while experiencing breathtaking sunset views of the Florida Keys. It's simply the hottest spot in the Keys to cool off. That's Jimmy Johnson's Big Chill at mile marker 104 in Key Largo. For more information, call today at 305-453.
This comes from the great Defo Llama. It's the bets you don't make, the chances you don't take, that can compromise an otherwise incredible life, my friend.
The only way to get your morning started is with Defo, joined by Lubie, right here on the Defo Show.
This is even better than that because we always enjoy talking to this gentleman here who has a very serious face on early in the morning. Does he not have the look of a guy who's frozen?
I feel like he's stuck.
Is that possible? Yeah. Chris Perkins, are you okay?
I'm fine. I think I'm frozen here.
All right,
But
well,
your
we'll see.
voice is good, and it's coming through strongly, so it's almost like we put up a picture on the phone, Chris Perkins. Hopefully you'll unfreeze so we can see how expressive you are to help illustrate some of these points that we want to make. Now, we want to completely blow off any kind of Dolphin talk, unless there is something there whether you're talking about.
I had Dolphins questions.
Are you obligated in the Sun Sentinel to just put something in a column that says nothing of any significance is happening right now, and doubtful that anything will happen anytime soon?
Well, you know what? The good thing about the Dolphins is there's always something going on. And look, Tyreek still hasn't issued any type of retraction, right? I don't want to be traded. I don't want out of here. And would you believe him if he did? I mean,
Yeah.
come on. That's kind of where we're at right now with that deal. Look, you still got the situation with backup quarterback. Like, what are you going to do at backup quarterback? What route are you going to take? You see what all these running backs did this weekend, the newly acquired guys. You see what happens when you get home field advantage for the first round of the playoffs. So there's still stuff we can beat them over the head with, Defo. I mean, come on. It's the Dolphins.
Yeah, it just seems like that there's, we were talking about your appearance here on the show earlier, helping to promote the fact that you were going to join us and salvage what otherwise was a meandering nothingness type of show. And we were thinking, geez, they really aren't doing anything. Now there was a statement made or issued in some fashion by Drew Rosenhaus, who represents Tyreek Hill and a zillion other players. But he implied that Tyreek Hill was all in on being with the Dolphins, that maybe that was just post-lousy season frustration that he was expressing how he wanted out of here. So do you buy into that at all, or do you have to give that any credibility?
No, you know what? I don't think that Tyreek wants to be traded. To me, Drew didn't clear anything up. He might have confused stuff. So I was right there for the interview with Tyreek after the Jets game, and look, here's what I've said is that Tyreek was forced to talk, which he should talk. He's a team leader. It's the season finale. It's a disappointing loss. It's a disappointing way to end the season. Fans want to hear from you as a team leader, so he's talking. But Tyreek usually makes eye contact when he speaks, and he usually speaks very firmly and assertively. And even if he's joking around, on this particular interview, his eyes are kind of darting around. He's looking up, he's looking down. I just think the words just tumbled out of his mouth. I want out of here. I want out. And then he had to kind of back it up after he said it. But look, he said probably like 15 or 20 times, he loves it here. He wants to retire here. I mean, who else is going to treat him better than Mike McDaniel? Who else is going to put up with all his crap? Other than, Kansas City was like, look, dude, you're out of here before you can really start affecting this team. The Dolphins are probably one of the few teams that would put up with this from Tyreek. I don't think Tyreek wants out of here at all. But as far as Drew, Drew said that he thinks that Tyreek is committed, but he also said he hadn't spoken to Tyreek. So how do you know he's committed? And then he says that Tyreek had a broken wrist during the joint practices against the Washington Commanders. Tyreek had come out before and said he had a torn ligament in the wrist. So I still don't know what to believe about Tyreek, even after the Drew Rosenhaus interview.
Well, you said something there that's interesting. The stuff about who's going to be nicer to Tyreek than Mike McDaniel. It's come out in the last week or so since the end of the season. Look, Mike McDaniel always came off as the player's coach, the buddy guy, whatever. Who wasn't demonstrative enough and all that. But we've seen coaches of all kinds, so you sort of just go with it. But the fact that like players were coming out saying, he needs to be this, he needs to be that. People around the organization were coming out, he needs to be this, be that. How in year 4, like that's the thing that a lot of people have asked, and I agree with them in that regard, is the guy is this is what he is. He's going to do a 180 in year 4. Like he needs to be more demanding. They need to have the fines weren't working. So he needs to do this. He needs to do that. It's like, okay, like, what are you saying? He needs to be a totally different coach. Well, he's the coach. Like it goes in line with all the stuff. I was wondering why they were retaining him. If you're asking him to change everything about himself, why are they like? I don't understand the retention of Mike McDaniel if you openly admit there's major issues with Mike McDaniel?
Here's the retention of Mike McDaniel. His mistake in insisting that Tua gets a contract extension, to me, is the only thing keeping him there.
Oh.
I was against this extension, as you guys know, because my reasoning was, if this season bottomed out, which it did, I'd have taken a broom to all three of them. Greer, McDaniel, Tua, get out of here. We're starting over. Well, now that you've signed Tua to that flawed contract extension, 4 years, $212 million, which you only signed him to, remember, because he had one great training camp practice and Mike McDaniel went crazy, banged on the table inside to Stephen Ross. You got to give this guy an extension. So they end up giving him this contract extension. And so, listen, now that Tua is here, who is the one who gets the most out of Tua? Mike McDaniel. And who works well with Mike McDaniel? Chris Greer. You remember where Mike McDaniel said when he found out that Calais might be going to Baltimore, he threw an adult temper tantrum. If Chris Greer was going somewhere, you know he would throw an adult temper tantrum, because it's kind of like how Tyreek gets away with stuff with McDaniel. Chris Greer pretty much does everything Mike McDaniel wants. Mike McDaniel pretty much runs the organization from the filling out the roster standpoint. So that's why he's back. And I'll tell you this also, Lubie, all of this stuff about the players and being late to meetings constantly, what a sign of disrespect toward Mike McDaniel. Like, the guy who takes up for you endlessly will not rip you in public, despite how many passes you drop, Tyreek, despite how many wrong routes you run. This dude does not take shots at his players in public. And your thanks is, I'll show up late to this meeting. I'll be late to this meeting. Who cares? All he's going to do is find me. I'll write a check. I mean, come on. Your team has to be better than that. Respect the game. Respect your coach. Respect your teammates. Like, this is why I say this team is fundamentally flawed and needs a culture change. Like, be a freaking professional. Like, at least show up for work on time.
Yeah, I mean, that would make some sense. I don't know that Shula would have stood for it. Jimmy would have cut some special teams player that wasn't of any great significance just to make a point. And it's terrible. I mean, look, in any job that you have, you should try and treat it with the kind of respect that would come under the banner of being a professional, and especially if you're making the kind of money they are in the pros. And I mean, Mike McDaniel has helped a lot of those guys get filthy rich, saying. You would have to think that they would want to reciprocate that type of respect. All right, let's get into the postseason so far. Let's start with the magic question, because I keep talking to people, Chris Perkins, and they imply that the Kansas City Chiefs are a cinch to make their way into the Super Bowl. Now, you wouldn't think that Houston would be an overwhelming hurdle. You don't have to be Skeets Nehemiah to clear that one, but always upsets are always a possibility. We saw 3 underdogs win outright in the 6 games that took place over the weekend. And yet, most people would say, and it's cliche-esque, but nonetheless, that, well, whoever wins the Baltimore-Buffalo game, that's your AFC champion. What's your thought on that? Now, where do we pin Kansas City at this stage? Are they, in some people's opinion, literally, Chris, they're a cinch to at least get into the Super Bowl and likely to three-peat. Do you feel the same way?
No. Now, look, they're my favorite in the AFC because they're at home and they've been there before, and they've got this magic spell over Buffalo that, Buffalo has just got to be praying that Houston takes Kansas City out, right? I mean, they want no part of Kansas City. But, I think there's 3 teams in both conferences to me. And really, it's going to be Baltimore, Kansas City, and Buffalo in the AFC. And then in the NFC, I'm thinking that it's Detroit and Philly, and who am I leaving out?
The Rams were pretty interesting last night.
The Rams were interesting, but you know what? I'll say this. One thing that really stands out to me about the first round of the playoffs is not the quarterbacks that won, but the home teams that won. And as it relates to the Dolphins, it just drives home the importance of you've got to get home field for that first round of the playoffs. but it just gives you such a huge advantage, no pun intended. I mean, you've got to get home field, Dolphins.
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, after the disappointment of this past season, I'm not sure I even think the Dolphins are playoff bound next year. I mean, they only needed to win a couple of more games, but that dead flat performance in the final game of the regular season, albeit with Huntley in there at quarterback, didn't impress me. The effort and guys quitting, like you mentioned, Tyreek Hill leaves the game in the fourth quarter. Again, a massive sign of disrespect for Mike McDaniel. All right, and last night's game of great consequence as the Rams prevail over a Minnesota team. People were crying, Chris, about seedings, and I believe this is totally cyclical. It was just kind of unusual that both in the college football playoff, some of the conference winners that got the bye in the first round were not the strongest teams. I would think that would be a trend that was marginal because usually if you win the SEC, you're a hell of a team, right?
Yes.
Or any of these conferences. But then same thing was said about the way the playoffs are seeded. Do you think that there needs to be some kind of change? They're talking about reseeding teams, and I believe they do that in hockey at this point, but I haven't followed it closely enough to see if they reverted back to their old ways. But I thought this was just somewhat of an aberration this year, where you had division winners. You might always have one weak one or maybe even two, but in general, don't you think the system is okay the way it is, or would you like to see some kind of a change?
No, I like the system the way it is. And here's kind of, I kind of look at the NCAA basketball tournament as the model for the tournaments. And what I love about the NCAA basketball tournament is in the early rounds, you get these David versus Goliath matchups, and you want to see the young guy, the upstart team, the little known team knock off the big team. But in the end, one of the blue bloods pretty much always wins, right? North Carolina, Kentucky, you're going to have your FAU in the Final Four and your St. Joe's in the Final Four. And that's a lot of fun. And it would be great if one of them could win it one day. But to me, kind of, the system works because the best team wins. Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, Villanova, whoever. To me, that proves that the system wins. But you just want to me, in the early rounds, you want to see the possibility of an upset. I think if like a St. Joe's won, it's a great story, but you always wonder, did the best team in the nation really win? So I call me old school. I like the system. I think it works.
So you talked about the Chiefs are your front runner, but you don't have them outpacing the pack. You have them like in the group. Yeah. And I mean, look, the only thing I think that benefits them is the Ravens-Bills should be a freaking war. Yep. And I know the Texans won decidedly and they're feeling themselves. They weren't great. They limped down the finish. They won't be at home much longer. Are they even home? I don't know if they're home this week. So they're
Houston's on the road. Kansas City.
Yeah. Like they were nice, and their defense carried Stroud, who's taken a massive step backwards. Their running game carried him because he's not the same guy he was last year, which is fine. I mean, he played sort of above his head last year. But that's who the Chiefs have to face, and those two teams are going to kill each other. So it feels like they sort of get a little bit benefit with that. When you talk about the NFC, the Rams are interesting. The Packers were the other team that was hanging around, but they're now out of it. The Eagles and the Lions seem to be toe-to-toe. Look, you talk about home field. Home field feels like it'll be as big an advantage for anyone as it will be for the Lions. I mean, this franchise has been as beleaguered as any in all of sports. At one point, they were like what the Marlins are to football. And to see them there. My problem with the Lions, and I know you covered him, and I know a lot of people down here loved him because he was fun to cover. The Dan Campbell, I'm going for no matter what strategy, which has helped propel them. It also fucked them last year, point blank, in the playoffs. And it's, to me, become very questionable. And yes, regular season, you're scoring tons of points, you're pushing. But in the playoffs, just getting any points a lot of the time is the deciding factor between winning and losing. Where are you when it comes to the NFC? Because it feels like the Lions are starting to distance themselves, but Dan Campbell scares the living crap out of me as a head coach in one of those key situations where you should just not overthink it, and he tends to always overthink it and overplay it.
Dan is an emotional coach, and let's face it, probably one of the reasons that they're where they are is because of his emotion.
Yes.
So you kind of have to take that with Dan Campbell, right? That's just part of the Dan Campbell experience. Like, how many people are on, how many defensive players are on IR for them? Like 12 or something. There's like something, but I think Campbell's emotion is kind of what gets you. Yeah, it's kind of what gets you over the hump, that rah stuff. And the rolling the dice on strategy, well, that's part of it. Didn't he do that again recently with one of the last few games of the regular season? I think right.
You know, what's weird in that, Chris, is that, when a guy's taking potential points off the board, he's at the opposition's 32-yard line, so he's going to have to go for maybe a 49-yard field goal, and you're thinking most of these NFL kickers are making anything inside of 50 or the majority of those kicks. And when he goes for like a 4th and 5 in that situation, you're asking yourself, is that smart? Or, I mean, is it more of a crisis when he's at his own 17 and he goes for a 4th and 1? But it's become far more common. You know, it's funny. We used to think that these guys were such pathetic wimps, these coaches. Look at the, maligning of Tony Sperano, which I guess maligning is not the right word because the criticism was right. But fans and even, media members that are formulating and helping guide people to an opinion on situations, they always thought, wow, what a fucking wimp. I mean, how could you not go for that? And now people are going for it, but I guess you have to, have some kind of critical judgment about when it's an extreme.
Exactly. You know what's funny is I'm old school like you are, Defo, and I think analytics have almost ruined the game from that standpoint. I mean, if we want to talk about the shifts in baseball, which thank goodness have been outlawed, the propensity for 3-point shooting in the NBA, right? Like the analytics tell you you're better off shooting a 3-pointer than a mid-range jumper.
Sure.
And so that's kind of, in football, that's kind of what you see on a lot of the 4th downs and a lot of that kind of stuff, that the analytics tell you you're better off going for it. I think Campbell is more of a coach from the gut guy than analytics. I don't know that for a fact, though. He might be more analytics than gut, but
it doesn't appear that way. I mean, he looks like Cro-Magnon man there on the side. Thinking he's counting skulls, not dissecting with a calculus stick there what to do in 4th down.
Yeah, but you know what? It's what strikes me though, Lubie, is going back to Detroit, and everybody being at home, I think is going to help tremendously because Buffalo. I mean, you look at how well Josh Allen plays at home. I know at one point they had scored 30 points at least 30 in every home game. I don't know if that held up through the entire season. But and then Philly, that Vic Fangio defense, baby. I mean, the Dolphins players, you should have listened to Vic. They knew what he was talking about. And of course, Detroit being and Kansas City. Look, as much as we say about Kansas City, though, I still maintain they won that Super Bowl last year with their defense. And if they win it again this year, it'll be with their defense, with Chris Jones and Trent McDuffie at cornerback, Chris Jones on the interior defensive line, and all those dudes, man. That is a nasty, nasty defense.
A couple of quick things here. Your opinion on the Buffalo-Baltimore game. Everybody, I mean, look, Derrick Henry obviously has established himself as a major force. Takes a lot of pressure off Lamar Jackson. Jackson has responded this year in top-notch fashion to all of the criticism. I keep talking about a friend of mine who absolutely is apoplectic about what a rat Lamar Jackson is for the amount of money he's torched in big playoff spots. And, he's even alluded to some of the things that you would have to say were way beyond being politically correct about Lamar Jackson in response to the amount of money that has been put to a blowtorch when he's backed him. But what do you make of this? I mean, Josh Allen swashbuckling his way, especially at home. And are you also secretly hoping for blizzard conditions that day? Or would you like to see the game played under as pristine circumstances as possible for Buffalo at that time of the year? Because it would be more of a true test of who the champion team really is.
I don't care about the weather because both of these teams play in rugged weather, right? I love the one thing I love about the AFC North. It's all outdoor football, baby. December and January, you better be a grown ass man to go to to go to Pittsburgh, to go to Cleveland, to go to Cincy, to go to Baltimore. I love that division in December and January. So I think Baltimore will be equipped. The shame. I wish this was the Super Bowl because I would love to see either quarterback win the Super Bowl. I would love to see Derrick Henry be the key to a team getting to the Super Bowl, but both of them can't win, so may the best team win. But I really, really, really wish this was the Super Bowl.
Well, and as we were saying, the cliche could be that this is going to decide the Super Bowl champion, which we're rooting for our buddy Dylan Rossi, who collects $480,000 on his 5-component parlay. Chris, you would love this. If the Ravens ultimately prevail in the Super Bowl. How tempting would it be? It's almost like being on Let's Make a Deal, right? Where they say, well, I'll give you $500 if you opt out now.
Oh, man.
Make it $1,000. But that's a nice piece of change to be sitting on. And I'm sure the buyout is very tempting at various stages. But if they get by Buffalo, then you certainly have to think, okay, this is more than a realistic possibility. All right. One last thing. Sanders, Deion.
Yeah.
Is he NFL coaching material in your opinion?
Man, I'm going to give the worst possible answer you can give on a talk show. I don't know. I heard Lubie going off.
Lubie hates Deion Sanders. Yeah.
I don't know if this dude can coach, man. I really don't. I know that he can, here's what I think. I think that from what I've seen, he's a better strategist than Mario Cristobal.
Right? That's not hard. My dog Skippy over here is a better strategist.
But what does that get you? A job in the Southland Conference? I mean, I don't know. So I hate to wimp out. I would say I would love to see him with Dallas because him and Jerry, I was there when Jerry recruited him from San Francisco as a player to play for the Cowboys. And they had this great Pizza Hut commercial because you remember at that time Deion played offense and defense.
Yes.
So they had this great Pizza Hut commercial of Jerry saying, "What do you want to play, Deion?" And Deion would say both. And so I don't know. There was some pizza that they were promoting, but these two deserve each other. These two would love working together. ESPN would become even more of the Dallas Cowboys network, but that's fine. I can ignore them. It would be a lot of fun for everybody, but Lubie, so I don't know if the dude can coach. I really don't.
I just you make me feel better about my take when you say because I rant and rave about it, but I'm like maybe I'm wrong. They keep getting better, so maybe he's just a magical coach that in hiding. But like people around the sport are like, yeah, that he doesn't coach. Like he's like I hear that consistently, so it's like all right, at least I'm not totally insane.
But you know what, Lubie, if you are smart enough to set up an infrastructure around yourself like Bobby Bowden did in his last couple of years, right? Where the thing ran itself and he just kind of spoke to the players, at the end of the day before that. It can work, but Deion is such a young coach. You would like to think the dude is more of a strategist in his earliest days, right?
Yeah, Bobby wasn't doing that in the 80s.
Correct.
Like Bobby was making his name.
Right.
Dadgum, boys. You played a good game.
Deion just started. Like to be there at the beginning, like that's a lot.
Bobby, though, I mean, his methods wouldn't work today. I mean, where he would have a stomach from Mama's meatloaf and somehow come out with the kids signed, and now
that's right.
You have to bring a mathematician with you, an accountant, a CPA if you're the head coach to come and interview the kid. And the kid's sitting on the couch not with his grandmother, but with his agent. So
that's right. Yeah, you have to bring Andy Ellisberg, the Heat salary capologist.
You need a capologist coming out there. Yeah. I don't know, Clemson. Can you really go over 100 million? NIL. And what are these kids promoting? I don't see them on any commercials.
It's never about NIL. It's actually just
on Restrepo selling like Kias from some obscure used car lot on 441. But so how does that justify a $5 million endorsement deal? It's amazing. All right, Chris, we love you, man. Good job. We'll look forward to any news that comes out of the Miami Dolphins facility regarding the possible improvement and future endeavors of the team. And it's always a pleasure having you on the show. Even frozen, you look good.
Even frozen from the Perkins estate with the swimming pool in the background there.
That's the best part of it, man.
We love you.
I know you're going right out there and diving in a pool like Greg Louganis, man. Just
That's right.
All
All right, gentlemen.
Thanks, my
Thanks.
friend. Always a pleasure. Chris Perkins, ladies and gentlemen.
Like you weren't wrong to talk playoffs, so I was like, fine. But the thing I brought up, it's the thing I keep hearing, and it's like, so all of our fears about Mike McDaniel are true. He's too easy on the players.
Yeah.
And now you want him to change. Okay. Like,
Doesn't
and again, coaches grow over time. We know coaches grow over stops and failures and age and experience, but is he going to do it from 1 year to the next? Like,
The guy might be too out there.
he is. Well, might be. He clearly is. Like,
He might be. I wasn't sure. I mean, you don't want to make some kind of, seemingly definitive judgment based on a very short sample size. But this year of Mike McDaniel didn't impress me in one bit. Not one bit. Because I don't know. I mean, he managed one game with an inept backup quarterback. It was the Huntley game, 2 games before the end of the season, where Huntley had a big ball game. He went like 22 for 29 or something, or even better than that. And, they won the game. It wasn't particularly pretty, but and you thought, okay, that's not a bad coaching job, right?
They played in the net Browns team that was literally just doing nothing on offense. But remember the game. That's the funny thing is everyone remembers the end. That game was close into the third.
That's true.
Remember they got 2 stupid ass touchdowns that made the game look more impressive. Like they were also doing, it was like 6-3 at like half or something. Like,
but it's like when you have an injury and you can't hit your backhand or something in tennis.
yeah. Can you?
So now you're trying to run around every shot, and look, maybe you find a way to win the game. To me, that's a sign of a decent coaching anyway, because he was certainly compromised from what he normally would want to do.
100%.
Yeah, but I'm not super impressed with. I mean, seems like a guy that you would genuinely would like to see him succeed, but that doesn't impress me right now as a strategist as much as he did in the beginning when you thought, wow, this man is a wild man.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing things that are so far out there that it'll take the league forever to catch up. But seems to me they caught up.
Yes, by halfway through the season they caught up.
Like they're laughing at these little slant patterns
100%.
and all of this. They're screaming at the ref, say it's a pick, and it's just not happening. At least he didn't do the Sarkisian thing. I have visions of such ugliness there with that Texas deal where he throws a pitch.
They could have won the fucking game.
5 yards behind the line of scrimmage when you're at the half-yard line. Why would you ever concede turf in that spot?
I just don't see how that works. Like, why do a play that there's no way it's going to work? Like, how do you, calling it? Yeah, this won't work.
Yeah, I mean, at best, the guy's going to go out of bounds for a 3-yard loss.
Yeah, like a successful play there would be only losing 2.
There was never an opportunity for that guy to cut inside.
No.
The only thing he could have done was just drop in place.
Yeah, the best play would be to run forward and get to the 1. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. These guys
that was a pretty bad. I mean, and that's a Mike McDaniel type of call.
Daniel would do that for sure.
Right. I don't think Vince was doing that. When he had the Packers there, he was handing the ball off to Jim Taylor, man. Even though he had Horning and all of this other stuff going on. All right, we're going to get out of here. Thanks so much for joining us here on the show. We will see you again mañana. Some changes coming up on the program here too. I am hoping to initiate those by next week. Mike Lubie Lubitz. So we're working on that, and that'll just expand the horizons of this show, while maybe taking even a little more of the workload off of our backs, which is always a favorable situation. All right, so we'll see you next time as we leave you know that.
The time.
It's 9:02.
Let's go to eat a damn snack.
Look what they done to my show.